Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for those of you who are joining live on Facebook and or who are watching later on YouTube. It is Election Day. We are continuing our series today where we're talking to civic leaders throughout Philadelphia and southeastern Pennsylvania and throughout the Commonwealth who are keeping a close eye on the polling places and elections today as we elect our municipal office holders and our judicial candidates, or retain some of our judicial candidates. And so, for our next interview, very excited to be joined by Keisha Hudson, the Chief Defender of the Defender Association of Philadelphia. Keisha, that is a wonderful title. Thank you very much for being here today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
So we've got a few questions that will help give us a sense, give the listeners a sense of the important role that you play through the judiciary. And so would love to just dive right in. For those who are not familiar with the Defender Association, how would you describe the work that your office does and the role that public defenders play in Philadelphia's justice system?
Yes, so public defenders are the only constitutionally required lawyers. It is your Sixth Amendment right through the United States Supreme Court opinion in Gideon versus Wainwright that if you are arrested and charged with a crime, you get to have a public defender. If you cannot afford counsel, you get to have a public defender. What that means here in Philadelphia is our organization represents around 75% of youth and adults that are arrested and brought into the system here in Philadelphia. Just to quantify what that looks like in terms of numbers, last year that was almost 35,000 clients that we represented last year. So again, we can't represent everyone who comes into the system. That has to do with funding and resources, but also cases that have to have court-appointed attorneys. So a lot of the things that I think people do not understand about public defenders is that you are entitled to one if you cannot afford to hire your own attorney.
Mm-hmm. You all play an extremely vital role. I like how you describe that as the only constitutionally mandated lawyer. That's a good way to put that.
Correct.
Can you share a bit about your path to becoming Philadelphia's chief defender and the experiences that you've had that shape your views of fairness and justice?
Mhm. I actually started my career here in 2002, right out of law school. And I was here for a little over 4 years before I then moved to the Federal Defenders for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, where I did representation for clients who were on death row in both state and federal courts. I love direct representation. I love working with clients one-on-one. And it is that part of the work now as chief defender that I do miss. I don't get to go to court as often. But in 2016, I decided to transition from direct client representation to working in leadership. I think public defense, we have a lot of work to do with funding. America should be funding public defense at around $20 billion a year. And right now, nationwide, the funding is around $6 billion. So having been an attorney who represented clients one-on-one, I saw the impact of underfunding and under-resourcing public defenders that had real life and death consequences for people. And I wanted to work in systems change and process change and reform. And so went first to Montgomery County, where I was the deputy chief. And when the opportunity opened here to be the chief defender, I wanted to come back home.
Nice. Great. Well, Philadelphia is glad to have you, have you back.
I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, right. Most cases in Philadelphia and throughout the state begin and end in our local courts, municipal court or court of common pleas in Philly, at least. What kinds of decisions are made in those courtrooms that most directly shape people's everyday lives?
Yes. So one thing that a lot of folks don't know about the Defender Association is we actually represent children who come into the dependency system. So if a petition is filed and a youth client from birth, all the way up to, before they're 18, is brought into the dependency system, we are appointed to represent them as their counsel. So we have nothing to do with the investigation that the Department of Human Services conducts. We have nothing to do with whether or not the child is going to be removed from the home. But if a petition is filed, we are appointed then to represent that child. We're also appointed to represent children in the delinquency system. So youth as young as 10 years old can be arrested and charged in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And we have clients as young as 10. And then, we represent, of course, adults in the system. We also do all of the probation violations hearing, regardless of whether you had a private attorney or not, which last year was around 12,000 people who came in on a violation, a technical or direct violation of their probation. And thankfully, we do not have the death penalty, but of course, would represent clients in very, very serious matters as well. So I think, people need to understand that we are an important part of the system, but also, understand that based on the issues that we have here in Philadelphia, around over surveillance, family policing, over policing, pretrial detention. The majority of our clients are detained pretrial because of bail that they cannot afford to pay. We are the ones charged with representing and advocating for clients throughout the entire system, from the lowest misdemeanor all the way up to the most serious felony, of course, which for our office is a homicide.
You started to touch on it. I want to go into a little bit more. How do the choices that are impacted by those hearings, by bail, probation, sentencing, et cetera, how do those impact not just the individual, but also the community at large, as you think about some of the more community-focused aspects of your work?
Right. I think we tend to think that, once an arrest has been made and once a client is charged and especially once a client is detained, that okay, like, the community, we don't need to really think about it further.
Right.
But we do, right? The majority of our clients, as I said before, are detained pre-trial, and we all have a presumption of innocence. And as public defenders, we have to hold the Commonwealth, which is the prosecution office, to their duty, which is to prove our clients are guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That is their burden to prove. When you look at the resources that we have here at the Defender Association compared to the resources of the District Attorney's Office, compared to the resources of the Police Department, right? Just to let folks know, my annual budget is around 68 million. The police department here is around 860 million, right? So you have to understand there's the complete discrepancy and imbalance in resources that come into play for everyone who comes into the system who has that presumption. I think also the community needs to understand the majority of our clients are coming back home.
Hmm.
The majority of our clients are charged with low-level, non-violent misdemeanors and felonies. And, even if they are found guilty, it may be a probation sentence or it may be a short county sentence of 1 to 2 years or a state sentence, but they're coming back to the community. And we can't forget that the reason they came into the system in the first place is because of the failure of several systems, right? Could be the failure of the community system, a family system, education, public health. All of those systems fail our clients, and that is when they come into the legal system. So we have to work to connect them to resources and understand what got them here, and ensure that regardless of whatever the outcome is at the end, even if they are sentenced to a period of years incarceration, that we are addressing the issues that got them here in the first place.
It's a really interesting and valuable way to think about that systems focus instead of just an individual,
Correct.
in addition to
It
individual.
is not an individual focused
Right.
issue. Our
Hmm.
clients get here through, oftentimes it is very clear when we work with our clients. And I have this conversation with, the district attorney, and I will say to Commissioner Bethel, that, public defenders probably know more about what it takes to create and maintain public safety than any other entity, because we know what got our clients here and what solutions are necessary.
Fascinating. That's really interesting. So the big focus, of course, on Pennsylvania today is around the retention races on the state Supreme Court. And then, of course, we've got a lot of other retention races on local courts as well. And so as voters consider, and they go to the polls today to consider the retention questions, what qualities or approaches do you think make for a judge who understands both the law and its impact on people's lives?
I will start locally. I think, our local judicial elections, and we have a number of judges who are running for both municipal court, and the Court of Common Pleas, as well as Commonwealth Court, Superior Court, and of course, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And I want to say at the outset, the Philadelphia Bar Association has a great website. The Committee of 70, of course, has also information on their website regarding the judges that are up for election and the ones that are up for retention, and encourage everyone watching to do your research before you make that decision. But justice is local. Justice is very local. Every day, there are judges in our family court, in our municipal court, and court of common pleas who are making decisions that not only will impact our individual clients' lives, but their entire families, and an impact on their communities. What we're looking for in a judge is not just their grasp of the law, which is of course important, and the law is always changing, and keeping abreast of the changes in the law, but also for us, realizing that you are sitting on the bench in the city of Philadelphia, and that the criminal justice system, or as I call it, the criminal legal system, is one that comes with structural racism and structural injustice. You're looking at a client and you're making individualized decisions, but you have to make individualized decisions looking at the client as a whole, right? The client is much more than incident that brought them there, before you in that courtroom. So we tell our lawyers and we train our lawyers that, we're not just looking at that client on the day of, and what happened in that one moment. It's a fraction of often a very complicated life, one that is filled with poverty and trauma, maybe impacted with mental illness, maybe impacted by drug addiction. But at its base core, right? Poverty and structural injustice, and that is why they're here. So we want judges to be educated about that. We want judges to understand implicit bias. We want judges to understand that these are issues that play a role. We want judges who are going to look at the police and not think they're immediately credible because they're the police. Right? They make mistakes and do make mistakes, which our attorneys and our staff point out every day in a courtroom. So from a local perspective, right, it's really important that the judges have that understanding. And then temperament. I tell everyone, go watch court. You will know how the system functions by sitting in a courtroom in Philadelphia for a couple hours, and you will get an idea of what is happening in the justice system here. But temperament is important. The judges need to remember, again, our clients have a presumption of innocence. Too often, I think the assumption is if they're particularly if they come out in handcuffs or in a jumpsuit, that, oh, they are guilty, they did it, and that's how I'm going to talk to you, that's how I'm going to treat you. But temperament is crucial. On the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, we have 3 justices that are running for retention. I would encourage, again, folks to visit the Committee of 70 and the Philadelphia Bar Association to learn about the justices and their record and how they have ruled on really important issues. But also, fairness and impartiality are key. And when we think about the Pennsylvania Supreme Court and the justices that are running for retention, we have to look at the issues of fairness and impartiality and temperament, and the overall issues that are going to create a fair, equitable justice system in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. You stole my thunder on my next question. I was going to ask, from what you've seen in the courtroom, how can a judge's tone or patience or approach change someone's entire experience in the justice system? You mostly answered that. Was there
Yeah.
anything off that question that, because I thought that was an important thing to emphasize.
Go court watch. I tell folks, go court watch. It's a little harder in family court because we're dealing with children and families, and often very private matters. And so you may not be able to get access to certain courtrooms or certain cases. But go and watch court.
Mhm.
You have children, as I mentioned, as young as 10, who are unfortunately talked to and treated as an adult. They're
Mhm.
not. The science on brain development and an adolescent brain development is well established at this point. But a 10-year-old cannot be talked to or made to understand certain consequences as an adult would. So it's, I think, what happens for many judges is when you're on the bench for a period of time, there is a little bit of fatigue and impatience that sets in. And unfortunately, that sometimes comes out in the way that our judges talk to our clients, our public defenders, our prosecutors, and their families who are there to support them.
Mhm.
You have to maintain that tone that is respectful, of our clients. They deserve that respect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So last question, just for voters who are watching today, what is like one last takeaway for them that you want them to understand about how judicial decisions, the judicial court, or the judicial system itself shapes the city that we live in and the state that we live
Yeah. I know you're talking to Brent
in?
Landau from the Public Interest Law Center, who will talk, I
Sure.
hope, about the decision on school funding,
Hmm.
which is so critical regarding how we fund our education system. And I mentioned earlier the failure of the education system is one reason people come into the criminal legal system in the first place. So when people talk about whether public defenders should be in certain spaces, school funding, education, funding and support is a huge thing for us to be invested in and pay attention to, and look at what the courts have done on education and school funding. But those are the really big issues that I think people can understand. I want people to, again, understand that our communities where we have crime, where people are coming into the system, it is not just a thing that is new or by happenstance. It is systemic. And when we look at the communities where my clients live and where my clients come from, and we look at how those communities have been treated over decades, starting with, redlining and disinvestment, and the marginalization of those communities and the underfunding and under resources of all the systems in those communities, from education to public health. We have to realize that, again, justice is local, and we have to push our stakeholders, including our justices, to look at how we can address those systemic issues that bring people into the system. And those issues are issues that everyone should care about, and judges hold the power to make those systemic changes. The legislature does as well, but the courts do hold that immense power.
Hmm. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Hudson, for your time today, for the work that you do. It's so
Thank
incredibly
you.
important. Really appreciate you giving the viewers a sense of the value of the work that you all provide and your team provides. So we're grateful and thank you
Thank
for
you so much for
joining
all
us.
you do. Thank you. I very, very much appreciate the work that you do. Thank you.
Wonderful.
My
All right.
pleasure. Take
Have a
care.
wonderful day. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.